One night, I discovered a hidden passage which ultimately led me to an amazing place. Impressive salt pillars, temples, and structures led me to believe that I was amidst the ruins of an old city. I was so anxious to learn more about this place that I began to rummage through the ruins. By pure happenstance, I stumbled upon an old data storage and retrieval system. I dug around a little more and unearthed a data storage disk.
Our history is tragic and regrettable. We were once a benevolent people, and our planet, though not a paradise, was relatively pleasant and suitable for our purposes. In those days of our history, our planet was called Chloros, which meant green. We mined and excavated the chlorine gas resources that were once in abundance here. The chlorine was then distributed to other planets that were deficient in the article. Upon arrival at its final destinations, our exquisite chlorine was then blended with other elements and compounds to create the purest bleaches and chemicals and the finest salts that could be found anywhere in the universe. Because of the volatile nature of chlorine and the possibility for its use as an agent of mass destruction, we were always careful about who we did business with. Unfortunately, a small contingent of once trusted leaders on our planet became sympathetic to a radical organization that was intent on eradicating large quantities of life. These rebels were operating on a peaceful sodium-based planet called Natrium, which was the only other planet in our galaxy. These revolutionaries were experimenting with the concept of fluorine warfare and were curious to see how much destruction could be wrought when combining their fluorine with our particularly reactive strain of chlorine. They were willing to sacrifice their own planet and have it serve as a barometer to gauge the efficiency of further treachery. They secured a large quantity of chlorine and then set out on their annihilistic course. The destruction of Natrium was so severe that it knocked us out of our orbit and sent us careening into deeper uncharted space. In addition, the hecatomb stirred up a massive sodium storm which was of such impressive magnitude that it engulfed Chloros, uniting sodium with chlorine, literally converting us into the salt orb that now exists. We renamed our planet Mackel in mock tribute to the universally recognized symbols for sodium and chlorine. No one could help us. We had become stranded orphans on this salt ellipsoid. All of the survivors were driven below ground because of the constant salt blizzards and the increasingly bitter temperatures that made life impossible at the surface. We constructed 3 major passages from the surface to the interior, and then took advantage of the naturally occurring labyrinths and the man-made underground corridors that had been constructed for the mining operations. We kept huge furnaces fueled by chlorine gas reserves unaffected by the disaster, running constantly to provide the interior with much-needed warmth. One of the surface tunnels led to the banks of the Great River, which was once a freshwater subterranean torrent teeming with life, but was now fast becoming little more than a brackish arroyo. The old salt city was constructed at this time near the river, with its principal structures being the Salt Temple, the Salt Theater, and the Saline Library. We knew that we had to ameliorate ourselves to our new environment, and do so quickly if we had any chance for survival. We appealed to the wisdom of our scientists and scholars as to how this adjustment could best be accomplished. A separate group of visionaries had begun to take matters into their own hands, experimenting by ingesting the salt crystals that had been created during the sodium maelstrom. They experienced phenomenal reactions to the crystals, but as a side effect they had become mute. In an attempt to share their visions with us, they staged elaborate performances and rituals for our benefit at the Salt Theater. We interpreted their demonstrations to mean that they were the chosen ones, and they needed us to mine for more salt crystals so that they could continue to experience these visions, which would ultimately reveal the secret for us all to save ourselves. The general population, so desperate for any message of hope, was quite willing to mine for the crystals. The scientists and scholars scoffed at the chosen ones, calling them eidolons and apparitions. The truth was, they really were becoming prophets to us. They were growing beyond our comprehension. The gap between us was widening. In time, the impurities and the salt dust of the interior made it impossible for the chosen ones to remain below ground with us. They had developed an addiction to the salt crystals, however, and needed us to mine in earnest for them. With the loss of their immediate guidance, we developed abulia. The high concentration of salt in our diets made us weak-minded, supine, and servile. As their addiction grew more intense, intense, the need to keep a steady stream of miners at work was becoming inevitable. A favored few from among the anonymous masses became the captors. They enslaved us and kept us infirmed. Our once beautiful city was abandoned, and we were sent to the distant mines to excavate the salt. As for the chosen ones, they believed that the absorption of the crystals into their bodies would bring about a saltatory evolution. They were in the process of transforming themselves physiologically into salt itself, and were becoming part of a living, conscious landscape at the surface. Their final stage was to evolve from a planet into a god.
When I learned what was really going on here, I became both envious and excited. Was this the entity that I was to bond with to create the best of all possible worlds? But something wasn't right here. Their conversion wasn't complete yet, and there were other elements present here besides sodium and chlorine. This wasn't the right time or place. They were all going to have to pay the ultimate price for delaying my mission. Even though I wanted to stay and further explore the city's ruins, I knew it was better for me to get back to my somniferous chamber. But I'll come back tomorrow.